I can tell you something. Your experience is meaningful to you, but it's not as unique as you think. It's part of the human experience. And your goal, I believe, in the pursuit of happiness and joy and purpose and passion is to transcend your valleys, but also to embrace your valleys and recognize that, hey, I got myself here. I ended up here. And I think you got to start in this conversation. I think we're pointing some of this stuff out. I have not set good boundaries. I do not have high enough values. And I have not made my peace with disappointment. Because you have to do all of those things if you want to have a passion and a dream and a purpose. You have to do all of those things. And I'm not saying they're easy, but I think they're absolutely a part of the thing. This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Podcast time, Evan. It is the time where we cast the pod. Okay, so Evan and I had a nice big talk before we got into this one. This is a rich one because we had to kind of, and what I mean by that is that we talked about some pretty big things that led us to this title. And this title kind of encompasses a lot of those big things, which I think we'll ultimately get into. It's always interesting how our conversations unfold into something. We go, oh, I guess this is kind of about this. Anyway, so the title of this, if you haven't read it, is What Comes with Passion. And I might expand that idea to what comes with your purpose, what comes with like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone into these visions or desires, or what comes with going after your calling or listening to your calling. There's a bunch of different ways we could probably phrase this, is my point. But for the time being, we're calling it What Comes with Passion, and I think that's probably how it'll stay. So, some interesting topics that came up. We talked a lot about boundaries. We talked about standards. We talked about teammanship. I'll just say this. When you're living in your comfort zone or your little bubble and you're not pushing yourself and you're just kind of satiating yourself and just kind of getting by from day to day, doing nothing really of purpose, passion, vision, or of calling, you're probably not going to be pushed very hard. And the world and your life is not going to expect or demand much of you. So having weak boundaries and having low standards and stuff like that, you're probably going to be able to get away with it because there's nothing that's really confronting those things. So maybe you have a bad habit, or maybe you have something that you don't really like about what you're doing. But until you push yourself out of that comfort zone, until you actually try to go for something and do something that includes other people and things that are bigger than just you, you probably won't find that any of this stuff is really relevant to you. So I would dare to say that this is a conversation more for the people who are either already pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and they're running into limitations, fears, challenges, setbacks, disappointments. That was a big topic that we discussed leading up to this. Or people who are like, you know what? I'm sick of my shit. I'm tired of being in my comfort zone. I got to start going for it in life. I'm tired. I'm wasting away. I'm wasting my time, and I want to do this. If you're on the cusp of pushing yourself out, then this conversation is very relevant because it's going to set you up, I think, for some things that you can get prepared for and get ready for. And this is a bit of a never-ending cycle as well, I've noticed. It's like you push yourself and you raise your standards, and then you push yourself again and you realize, I got to raise my standards again, and I got to set even stronger boundaries than I set the last time. And the more you expand yourself, the more you go on an adventure, the more you push yourself out there, I think the more relevant this conversation becomes, because it's a perpetual thing. The more we go after our passion, the more we push ourselves out of our comfort zone, the more we're confronted with weak boundaries, low standards, low self-esteem, the possibilities of disappointment, all these types of things. And then how do we navigate that? How do we traverse it? How do we deal with it? So that's what I'm thinking we're getting into, Evan. So I don't know. What do you think we're getting into?
I think that you did a pretty good job setting the stage. Yeah, I think part of a large part of this conversation coming into it, at least in my mind, is, with what comes with passion is talking about a lot of those, like some of the hard parts that come along with going for something that you're passionate about. Because I think very often with that, like when we decide, there can be a lot of fears, I guess, in just deciding that you're going to go for it and do the thing, which is, hey, that in itself deserves a kind of celebration. That's a win. But then, like, when you're in it, like, it's not, I think that oftentimes we have these ideas of like, okay, I'm doing this thing that I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm meant to do. And there's excitement and there's energy and there's all kind, and there can be a kind of elation and that sense of breaking free from whatever it was that you were in before. And that's all real and that's all valid and that's all good. And that's part of it too. But there are things like disappointments. There are heartbreaks. There are challenges, like you said, with things like boundaries, because there's new relationships that you have with people and with things and with, like that come into the picture. And yeah, not all of it is just, rainbows and butterflies. Like there are challenges that come with going for your passion. And so it's about, to a certain extent, not having any illusions about that. Not having any illusions that like, hey, it doesn't mean that it's just all smooth sailing from here. But it's still ultimately all a very good thing. But just, yeah, how do we sort of, how do we still keep ourselves healthy within it? Because that's still a question, it's like keeping yourself healthy and doing something you don't care about is extremely important, right? But like that doesn't completely go away just because you're pursuing passion. You still have to take care of yourself in certain kinds of ways. And I think that a lot of the things that we're saying of what that means, I would maybe boil that down into having a lot to do with how and where we're directing our energy, who we're directing our energy into, because you only have so much and there's only so many places that you can do it before you run out. Mm-hmm. Right. And especially when you're doing something you're passionate about, like you can end up just burning through your energy, and you can easily throw yourself into a place of burnout just because you're riding that kind of a high, but it's not really sustainable. And so how do you consistently, sustainably do the thing, right? Sometimes having to create boundaries, not just with others, but even with yourself, right? And I think that, yeah, there are so many aspects in which navigating our energy on a day-to-day basis, like it in many ways guides us, like sort of where our energy level is in terms of, okay, what are the things that are most important? What are the things that are most meaningful to this passion, right? And not trying to do everything and be everything and cater to everything and everyone, because no matter what we do in this world, it's always relational to everything else in the world, right? It's always relational to, like the reason why we have a passion in whatever it is that we're doing is because it is in some ways connected to others in the world, right? Like otherwise if it was, if this was, what was that movie, I Am Legend? It's like the only person left in the world, it's like if you're the only person left in the world, like most of us, like your passion doesn't really factor into anything, because who's it for? It's not for anybody. It's not like it's always deeply connected to the people that are within our sphere and within the sphere of our passion, right? Like it's always connected and tied to these people, and it's interacting with them and they're interacting with us. And so that comes with it responsibilities, and that comes with it just that, again, that awareness of how are we directing our energy into those things, because it does demand it.
So one thing that comes up when you're talking about this relationship to other people, I think it's an interesting thing, because if you are living just for satiation, just trying to feel good, be happy, please yourself, pleasure yourself, whatever it is that you're focused on, that if it's all about you, I think you'll ultimately find that that's a one-way road that leads to a dead end. And I think before you've hit the dead end, before you've hit essentially the rock bottom of it, you think you're okay. You think, yeah, this is fine. I just want to be happy. People will say, I want to be happy, and I have a right to be happy, and all of this shit. It's like, well, yeah, you do. But the thing is that what feels good right now, and what might even be giving you a sense of happiness in this moment, might not actually be the pursuit of happiness. It's because the pursuit of happiness, if you're going to look at it as like, happiness is a fleeting feeling. It's one of the flavors that come with all the other emotions. And you'll never, I think one of the most important things that people need to recognize is that you don't want happiness all the time, because once you get happiness all the time, it's not that you lose that happiness, but you lose context of that happiness. And so when you don't have sadness, and you don't have, say, fear and anger and disgust and all these other feelings that may come up with you, you lose context of what is happy. And what happens is you become ungrateful, you become entitled, and you need another high. And it becomes this chasing the dragon situation, where people who, they find this thing that feels good, and they just do that over and over, and they try to do that. It's not sustainable, because you need the valley to appreciate the mountain. And, Alan Watts, he talks about this. Everything is like a wave. How do you have the wave without the crest of the wave, without the trough, right? So you need the dip. And so the dip is an interesting thing, because the dip is where disappointment exists. It's where, betrayal exists. It's where all the fucking ugly stuff that we like, I don't want any of that. But the truth is, in some ways, you have to, when you trust, as something a wisdom that I came across at some point was that you don't trust because you think you'll never get betrayed. You trust because if you get betrayed, you'll be able to handle it. Because the thing is like, betrayal teaches you in some ways why trust and why all of this stuff matters. And there are people who break trust and have no idea, no concept at all the type of damage they've done. They fucking just obliterated somebody, or they obliterated a bunch of people, or a situation, and they just absolutely destroyed it. And they walk away, they don't even look in their rearview mirror, and they don't even know that they fucking totally just monumentally shifted the experience for everyone else who they left in their wake. And they have no idea. And then you're there and left in their betrayal, thinking like, I'm so hurt. And they don't even fucking know. They have no idea that they fucking destroyed you. They have no idea that they hurt you, because they're in this ignorance, this like blissful naivete of what they've done. And so if you want to build meaningful relationships, and you want to build, it's the beginning of recognition that you are a very powerful being, and that you can cause a massive amount of damage in your wake and just in your direct impact of things. And when you're living in a small life, in a small world where it's all about you and all you care about is yourself, you're just damaging the world all around you all the time. But because you're so focused on yourself, you have no idea that you're doing any of it. And you might think, hey, I'm a good person. I'm really good. And meanwhile, people are like, that guy's a piece of shit, or that she's a piece of shit, whatever it is, right? Like, the thing is that just because you're blissfully unaware of the impact you're making on the world doesn't mean you're not making an impact. And, a lot of the reason why we want a lot of the things that we want is because we've gone through the trough, we've gone through the valley, we've gone through the low part. And so then there becomes this reason as to like, this is why I'm building these things in my life. This is why these things matter. This is why I have standards. This is why I have boundaries, because my boundaries got abused. My standards were too low. I didn't hold people accountable. They walked over me. They did whatever they did. And I never said anything. I never did anything. And so what ends up happening is, if you don't change, if you don't change your standards, if you don't change your boundaries, you will be stuck in this small place. And one of the saddest things to me in this world is that people stay in this small place and they choose the role of the victim, thinking that sympathy, like, oh, life is so hard for me. And people go, yeah, life is so hard for you. And they live in that and they go, people understand this is hard for me. It's like, you know what? The reality is life's hard for everybody. And I can tell you something, your experience is meaningful to you, but it's not as unique as you think. It's part of the human experience. And your goal, I believe, in the pursuit of happiness and joy and purpose and passion is to transcend your valleys, but also to embrace your valleys and recognize that, hey, I got myself here. I ended up here. And I think you got to start in this conversation. I think we're pointing some of this stuff out. I have not set good boundaries. I do not have high enough values. And I have not made my peace with disappointment. Because you have to do all of those things if you want to have a passion and a dream and a purpose. You have to do all of those things. And I'm not saying they're easy, but I think they're absolutely a part of the thing. Because you cannot pursue a dream without the potential of disappointment. So you have to decide, listen, I might get disappointed, but if I do, I will deal with it and I will grow and I will evolve, and then I will go again and I will learn and I will be better, and I at least will not be disappointed again that way if I can handle it, if I can deal with it. But I might be disappointed in some other way, and that's the reality. But you build character. And I think ultimately that's a lot of what this is. What comes with passion is that you have to build character. And character comes through the hardships and the valleys and the troughs and all these low moments. That's where you're going to learn who you really are and what you're made of. The high moments are going to feel good, but you're only going to really get to enjoy those high moments if you can gracefully walk through your low moments.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about a lot of bad things that happen to people, like and sort of what you do with that, what you do with those things that happen to you in your life. And it's like, yeah, you can either sort of, crawl into your hole and just sit in there with it, but that's such a kind of a waste of it, of those very real experiences that happen, because you can take those things and you can ask, what did I learn from this? Like what good came from this? What did this show me? How did this make me more human? These experiences, and you can share that like with the world in some kind of way, because honestly, I think that for most people within passion, you'll often find that there's some piece of pain that's in that passion. There's some, like, I think there's something very, it's like a mixture of something, like there's something very pure very often in passion where it's just like, you just love this thing, but there's also very often there can contain this element of, I love this thing, partially because this thing gave me something that was missing, or this thing gives me something that helps me with this thing that I have that gives me pain, right? It can be, there can be something tied, and I think it's an important part of it, right? I think it's an important part of what helps our passion to stay human and stay connected and tied to each other, right? Like, what is it for, right? What is this passion for? It's like, well, it's because, as I said, like, being a human, no matter who you are, rich or poor, like, I remember, I can't remember who said it, but the quote, it's like, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a very hard battle. Buddhist meditations, very often, like, there's the compassion meditations are about very often thinking about somebody that you might have a poor opinion of, or you might think, hasn't known a bad day in their life. And it's just like, hey, remember that this person is going to die just like you. Remember that this person is probably afraid of that. Remember that this person has probably like has people that they love who don't want anything bad to happen to the people that they love, who will probably experience bad things happen. Like, there's so many places where we can connect as human beings to each other and say, like, yeah, we are like, we are so much the same. And our, that those places where we've experienced pain are places where we can connect with people and we can find joy out of it, which to me is a different thing than happiness. Like, as you're saying, happiness is is kind of, it's part of the waves, right? It comes and it goes, right? Joy is there's a different quality to joy. Joy is I think can be an underlying state. Like, there can still be, there can be joy that's underneath hardship, right? There can be connection that's still happening in the midst of something painful, right? And definitely I can think of moments of grief, just like with family members where, a family member has died, and it has brought together other people who, like other family members who we haven't seen each other in such a long time, and suddenly we're connected and we're all hurting what's happening, but there's this joy, there's this thing of being brought together and getting to laugh and getting to do all of these things. It's all part of it. It's a very strange thing, and it's part of what makes us whole, and real members of the earth, kind of thing. So anyhow, I feel like I might be going off on a little bit of a thing, but it's what I'm trying to bring this back to the fact that it's like, yeah, pain's very often there's an element of it in passion. And so there's something that we can do with that pain that is creative, right? Just sitting with it and wallowing in pain is not doing anyone any kind of good. And that pain could be a clue. That pain can sometimes be a hint at some place where you can do something really good. There might be somebody who's feeling exactly the same thing as you, right? Who's maybe in a worse place than even we're at, but there's some way in which you can speak to that person, which is part of the beauty of art. It's like you can speak to that person, you can speak to that experience, and you can give someone that outlet. You can give someone that piece of connection where, they're wallowing alone in their room and that song comes on, this piece of music that just goes, holy shit, there's somebody out there that really actually fucking understands this, right? And we can have that catharsis. So I feel like I can probably bring this into some sort of broader scope of this conversation, but that's, like what comes with passion. Like, yeah, it's sometimes pain, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it might even be a necessary thing. But I think that there's unnecessary pain that we can get too involved with, and that has, I think, a lot to do with when we don't have certain kinds of boundaries, when we and our expectations too, I suppose, in terms of what we think is going to come with pursuing passion. And I don't know, I'm just waffling at this point, so I'm pulling the ripcord on this one, Brandon.
Okay, well, one of the things that one of my acting teachers told me, Matthew Harrison, he used to talk about this, and I don't know if he got it from somewhere else, but he shared it with me and others, and I always found it quite valuable. Was he always used to talk about how passion is joy, pain. It's your joy and your pain that are somehow intertwined and connected. And I find that to be quite true because, like, I'll coach and mentor and teach, but like a large reason why I do that is because I just wish someone would have coached and mentored and taught me when I was younger. And I try to, and so there's kind of the pain of when I was lost and confused and I didn't have anybody to like lean on or ask questions to who could give me any like, guidance on certain things. And so there's a part of my pain of that experience which makes me passionate to want to share and teach with other people and just help them. So, and also like I think about like acting, there's something about, and directing and writing are very similar. I would actually throw them all into this pot, but like the pain of understanding a character who's going through a situation that maybe I haven't even experienced, but then like it's strangely joyful to go into that pain because it somehow makes me feel connected and alive and like a part of it, And I think that one of the challenges we all face is we all feel alone in the world. We all feel like our suffering and our challenges and our pains are unique to us and that we're one of a kind. And, and one of I think the great wisdoms of this world is beginning to see that your pain and suffering is not much unlike someone else's. And that actually is part of the reasons why we connect so much and why we actually work so well together as human beings, because we have empathy and we have compassion. And there are people in the world who are so hurt and so damaged that they have they're incapable of things like compassion and empathy. They're like, they have psychological disorders. There are people, and at the same time, this is where it becomes a matter of boundaries and standards, where it's like, I understand that you came from a painful place, and I understand that there's a big ego that's covering the true version of you that might be underneath all of this. But at the same time, we have to be mindful with our compassion and our empathy not to let people walk all over us. And it's one of those binding and connecting forces. And at the same time, it's one of those things that needs to separate oil from water. And, there's you don't have to hate your enemy is ultimately what I'm saying. And there are people that are, they are your enemy. Like there are people who are out there in the world and for whatever reason, they want to destroy you. It's just the reality of this life. Maybe they're a different tribe and they think your tribe is taken, whatever. They want to get you, or maybe they're jealous of you. Maybe they're envious of you, maybe whatever. But there are people in this world that they get into their low vibe self, their destructive self, their jealousy, their envy, their destruction, and they think that hurting or damaging other people is somehow doing some good. And they get convinced of this, and this is a reality in our world. And a compassionate, deeply compassionate, empathetic person can give someone like that too much grace by having weak boundaries and low standards. And you don't have to hate somebody to not let them in your life. You can keep them out of your life. You can set up strong boundaries, and you can keep the walls up that don't allow them into your intimate area of your life, like your emotional world, your depths, your fears, your insecurities, whatever that might be. But it doesn't mean you have to hate them. You just simply understand that they are in that place and that's where they are. And it doesn't make you like not a humanitarian or not like a good person. I had a client this one time, this is back 5-6 years ago, actually. And their mother was like narcissistic, like horrible. Just the stories they would share about what happened to them as a kid. And so at a certain point, naturally, they grew up and their mom abandoned them, abused them, all sorts of horrible shit. But it's their mom. So, there's this weird relationship we all have with our parents where we kind of like love our parents in a certain way because they gave us life. But at the same time, some of us were born into really toxic parental situations. Anyway, his mother was passing away and he found out about this, and he hadn't seen her in years, I suppose, something like that. And it was really struggling. Like, should I, like go and help her or whatever? And we were talking about it's like, it doesn't make you like a good person to like I think sometimes we're after these things. Like I think sometimes when people are toxic or abusive or destructive in our life, that we think I have to be the bigger person. I have to give them something, help them in some way. It's like, no, you don't. Sometimes not helping them or giving them anything is the thing that will help them the most. Sometimes actually having strong boundaries and saying like, you must stay arm's length away from me or whatever a length away from me is how we're going to have a relationship. And so, I think there's one of the struggles I find a lot in the artist community is that artists can be very empathetic and very compassionate, and they really they really want to see the best in people. And it's a beautiful thing. It's such an awesome thing that they go out and they develop this and they really nurture that. But sometimes as artists, you actually have to be higher standards and better boundaries than the average person, because people see you as so graceful and grace-giving and so empathetic and compassionate, and that they will take advantage of that. And it's just the way the world is. It's not a matter of like, you don't have to look at that person as a bad person. You simply have to learn how to navigate this world. And it's no different than, say, being in the jungle and walking up to the tiger and trying to pet it on the head. A wild tiger, or a wild lion or something like that. Like it might just eat you, you know what I mean? And it probably will. But the thing is like, you have to understand that there's a boundary of respect and that there are dangers out there in the world, even other people. And you might understand them. You might have compassion for them. And you might say, well, they're trying so hard. But at the same time, you have to remember that sometimes people, they will harm you, not because of anything other than it's almost in their nature. I'll share one story actually. And this is it's not like it's a, I don't know if you can call it a story, whatever. Maybe people have heard of it. I'll just share the story. So there's a river, and on one side of the river, the forest is burning down. And on the other side of the river, it's clear and free. And at the river edge, I think there's a frog and there's a scorpion. Probably heard this story. So anyway, the frog's about to swim across the river to safety and get away from the fire. And the scorpion sees the frog and goes, "Frog, put me on your back and swim me across the river with you. Save my life." And the frog goes, "No, if I do that, you'll sting me and poison me." And the scorpion goes, "No, I wouldn't do that. I want to live too. So I promise I won't sting you if you swim me across the river, and we can both live and we'll go on our merry way." The frog looks at the scorpion and goes, "Okay, fine, that makes sense," has compassion for the scorpion. Midway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog and poisons it. And the frog turns to the scorpion and says, "Why'd you sting me? Now we're both going to drown and die." And the scorpion goes, "Sorry, it's in my nature." And there are some people that you just have to understand that it's in their nature. They're in their nature. I'm not saying they can't transcend that. I'm not saying they can't figure that out. But if you know someone's nature, if you know them to not keep their word, if you know them to be destructive, if you know them to be these things, don't try to save them or convince them. Let them find their own way. Let them prove that. And you may take that chance and get stung by the metaphorical scorpion in your life. But the thing is that, it's a metaphorical death. And this is where boundaries and standards get set. And you talked about how we are a part of the world, but it doesn't mean that we don't naturally have predators and prey and all this type of stuff that exists. And I'm not saying that we need to frame the whole world like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that what comes with passion is that you, the frog, will encounter the scorpion. And you will have to make your choices on how you'll deal with that. That's what comes with pursuing your passion. That's my point.
Yeah, I think that, it's like recognizing that in some ways, like that passion that you have is sacred, like, and treating it as a kind of a sacred thing that you have to take care of and you have to protect it to a certain degree. And I know that both, like, you and I have had different experiences with our collaborative histories with people. I haven't encountered too many scorpions in my life, so I'm not necessarily looking for them, but I do understand that there are people who just, they don't, I'll say, like, it's not, because I think even like saying the scorpion, it's like, oh yeah, the person who's just, they're looking to get you. And it's like, that's probably not very many people, but my experience is more so like the people who are just not willing to show up in the way that they need to show up. And, I'll just point to, a couple of like industry things. Like, you look at the great sort of film directors or the great music producers, and they have people that they just keep working with, right? And that's part of protecting that sacred thing, right? I have this passion. I have these things that I can do very well, and I do with so much energy and so much fire, right? And in order for me to do this, to maintain this, I need to make sure I have the right people around it, right? Who understand that and treat that with a certain kind of respect. And in the same way, I'm going to treat these people with that same mentality, right? I'm bringing this person in to do this guitar part on this song, because like I just, and they're going to bring something to this that I like, that's special and incredible. And my role is just bringing them in to a certain degree, right? And I can trust this person. That allows me to not have to shove my energy off into all of these things, or have to worry about this person because this person never fucking shows up, right? It's like that, these are the kinds of things that, at least I know I'm talking about. I think you're talking about as far as what those boundaries are, right? And it's just about like good collaborators, right? Having other good creative people who are also doing something with fire and passion, and definitely, like, because for you and I, coming from like, acting, film and television backgrounds, like, it's one of the most collaborative art forms that's out there, like just the incredible amount of people that can be involved on a production it's insane that anything gets done. But I think that's a big part of that sort of protection, that boundaries is knowing, is having the right people around you, right? And there was something else that I really wanted to get into with this, because there were so many things that we had talked about before we got into this conversation. So there's another thing that comes with your passion, especially, if you've just started to go into something, if you've just committed into this thing, is that you'll often find a lot of there can be a lot of people with their advice for you about what you're supposed to do or how you should do something. And this is something that I think that is also you need to be very careful about. You should always be open to help and advice from people, but it is also something that you need to selective. And part of the problem is though is that you never know whether you're going to be getting good or bad shit from people. And sometimes you do know. Yeah.
Guys, just be careful now because you shared a story.
Yeah. I shared a story.
You shared a story about saying no to feedback.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. Yeah. There's sometimes there are moments that you do know, and definitely having trusted people around you. But even when it's trusted people, you still have to be very mindful. I don't want to say careful, but you have to be mindful about it because oftentimes your passion and the vision that you have for something, while sometimes naive, contains with it a very powerful and unique spark to it. A spark that is what makes something very often so uniquely and innately yours. It's the thing that offers you the unique perspective, sometimes in a field with lots of other people in it, right? And sometimes people can come in with their advice for you, and sometimes that advice comes from a place of fear that people have for you and going into this thing. It's like, well, you need to make sure that, you do this with it, and don't do this or don't do that. You need to make so people feel that, and it's oftentimes people don't know what they're talking about, right? Like they, that's like a good question to ask. It's like, well, what does this person actually know about this thing that I'm doing? Right? Do they actually know very much about it? Do they actually really understand the thing that I'm trying to do? Do they really understand the vision of the thing that I'm doing? Because, this is something that I've just recently been seeing in terms of my own life and how I've gone about a lot of my passion projects I've listened to things that people have told me, people who I love, people who I respect, and I don't think it's a bad thing to listen to those people, but coming to a realization that it's like, oh, but this person doesn't fully understand what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. And by me watering it down, which is happen, I water down sort of the vision. I water down part of the thing that is what I'm very passionate about. And just to be like, oh, okay, I think this will make it more pleasing for other people. Or I think that, it's sort of interjecting some sort of overcomplication of something, but whatever it does is it ends up just watering down the passion a little bit. And that thing could be the very thing that is what brings people to you, right? But you've just cast it aside out of some idea of, oh, but this is what this is what I think people will like, right? It's the same thing, it's like art is so much that process is once you start getting into that game of like, well, this is what I think people will like more, right? It's like, well, again, very often you do not know that. You don't know that. Maybe that weird thing that you have in your mind that you're excited about, that you think would be so fucking cool, that or so powerful for people. And yeah, it might seem a little outlandish. It might seem a little bit out there. Maybe no one else is doing it. But that's also something that like we applaud all the time. Is like, whoa, they're doing something no one else is doing. It's so funny how we do this, in our culture where it's like, we say like, you got to do something no one else is doing. It's like, okay, well, I have this idea. Oh, not that. No, you got to make it more like what everyone else is doing. Right. And it's just like, what what the fuck, and that's a very challenging and confusing landscape that we've created for ourselves here. But this is what I mean, is that it's like, you got to listen to that you got to listen to the passion and the fire and what that's telling you, the direction that thing is telling you to go, right? And so that you're not watering down that the fire. Like don't dampen that thing down because of someone else has an opinion about it, right? Listen to what other people have to say, but be very careful. Ask questions about the things that they're saying. Like, again, like, what does this person really know? Do they really understand the vision? Like, does this person have a lot of experience in what I'm doing? Is this person, how similar do me and this other person think? Right? Because maybe they're just, they're a completely different spectrum of the brain kind of person. They operate from a completely different side. And so they just might not have the same, like, they might not be able to see it in the way that you can. Right? And maybe they're not even the person that, what you're doing it's not even for them. Right? You've got a completely different audience, even if you really respect this person, right? Take in those perspectives, but it's like, you've got to honor you've got to honor that passion, right? At least enough to give it an opportunity to be expressed in its fullness. I think that's really, like, that's the opposite of when you're watering it down. It's like, have you given this thing the opportunity to be seen in its full light, right? Because only until you've done that can you, in some respects, know where you might need to, like, start reining some things in, right? But, like, how else will you know? Otherwise, you've never really given us the fullness of what you have.
A lot of good stuff there, man, I have to say. Okay, let me see here. One, let me just go back quickly to this one point. We were talking about Scorpion the frog. Most people are going to see themselves as the frog. I think this is just really important, little point of detail. We very rarely see ourselves as a scorpion. It's very easy to see others as a scorpion, but not ourselves. And this was the thing I was talking about, the oblivious scorpion, right? The very rarely are people going out directly to hurt you and harm you. It's more like it's an opportunity that they have that harms you but helps them. And they would rather help themselves than be, and they might not even realize that they're hurting you and taking their own opportunity. Case in point, I have a great example of this. I was in a play. A friend of mine cast me and another friend. It was like a David Mamet play, American Buffalo. We were in rehearsals. We got a director. We got all these people. And then right when we were about to go on stage, one of the actors, the other guy who got cast, he was like, I just booked a commercial. He's like, and he wanted to go shoot it, but it was going to be like on our first opening night. And the actor who had produced the show put all his money into it, put all this. He was like, you can't do this. Like, you're letting us all down. Like, we all would have been screwed had he done this. And he's like, well, it's a great opportunity for me. It's like, yeah. And that's how a scorpion works, is they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the opportunity that is in it for them. And they're not thinking about all the damage they would cause to all the people that put this play together and reserving the venue and all this other. And he was like, well, he's like, I'll pay you. I'll take the money from the commercial and I'll pay you for opening night. And it was still like, dude, we have worked together. We've spent months to get this here, to do this. It's not about the money. And he ultimately didn't do the commercial, thank goodness. But that's how a lot of the time you'll find a scorpion works in this world, is that they're not actually out to hurt anybody. They have no intention of that. In fact, they don't want to. They just don't realize how they might if they take this action that they take. I have had a couple scorpions in my life who have been destructive people, who have wanted to see me hurt because for some reason that personally maybe helped them. My father is definitely one who's been an example of that in my life at times. But that's actually quite rare. That's usually not the case. And yeah, and it sucks to experience that. It's fucking brutal. Don't get me wrong. But most people, when they are the scorpion And I've probably been the scorpion myself. And the reality is I've definitely taken some humble pie and be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe in that action, I kind of hurt people and I tried to make up for the shit that I've done wrong. But you have to also give grace to people who are the scorpion, but you have to understand that most people, when they're playing the role of the scorpion and they might be hurting you or harming you or causing some trouble in your life, that usually they're doing it mindlessly, ignorantly, obliviously. And it's boundaries and standards are about making them aware of that. So when we're talking about what comes with passion is you have to learn to speak up. You have to learn to stand your ground. You have to learn to set your boundaries. You have to learn to do all this. So I just wanted to bring that point up, which brings me to my other point. And it's kind of something you touched on, teammanship, how there's more people involved in this than just you, and film is a great example of that, because like hundreds of people sometimes to make movies and shows and things, and whole departments and people that are depending on you. So, when you're looking for your personal gain and what you get, if you want to have a passion and a dream and a vision and you want to answer a calling, you're not going to do it alone. And anybody who thinks you're going to go out in the world and you're going to do some great thing in the world alone, you're out of your mind. This is not how it works. At some point, you're going to have to collaborate. At some point, you're going to need people to help. At some point, you're going to need to team up. At some point, you're going to need assistance, guidance, mentorship, whatever. You're going to need some other people. And the more you go for it, the more passion you pursue, the bigger it becomes and the less about you it is. And for you to essentially sail that ship with that crew, to captain the ship, if you sink the ship, everyone else drowns. So just remember, you can be the captain and the scorpion. Just because you think you're the frog doesn't mean you're not the scorpion. So we never often think of ourselves as a scorpion because we don't always think about the people that we hurt in the pursuits that we have. But if you want to be somebody that creates a good legacy and creates good things in your passion and purpose, you should really consider how you're going to take care of the people that are going on this journey or voyage with you, which is something that kind of, this is the connectedness, I think, of this whole thing, right? Leadership is not about the praise and the rewards. It's about the responsibility. And we have a world where when people look at leadership, they think about the accolades and they think about the rewards you get for being the lead. But actually the best leads in the world, and I'm talking about ship captains, I'm talking about leading actors, I'm talking about anything like that. The best ones are the ones that are responsible for the team, that take care of everyone else. The Fonz, what's his name? Henry Winkler? Henry Winkler. I was on set. I was a PA on a movie of the week or something that he was on. And he's, he was busy doing his work. And then one day he's just like, he took all of us as a crew and he said, "Hey, what do you guys want?" And he bought us all like a nice coffee. And we all got to have a nice coffee together. And he just did that. And that's a stand-up guy. Because I can tell you that everybody on that production after he did that was like, I'm here to help you. And all he did was just reach out and get everyone a nice coffee for the day, a nice latte or something, whatever they wanted. And it's probably, it's a small extension of nice quality, but that's a guy that's being a leader, that's taking care of everyone and saying, "Hey, I care about you. You matter. You're helping us do this." And he thanked us all. I thought, wow, this guy's great. And it really made me appreciate him. But I'm like, no wonder you're the fucking Fonz. No wonder you're the lead guy, Mm-hmm. It's like you have a quality that makes people want to help you, that makes people want to be a part of this. And, we were working long hours, man. Like we were working like long days, like way overtime. And then I had to drive like an hour home. I got like 5 hours of sleep. And then I'd have to drive an hour back. And all the way from downtown to like Fort Langley. And it was just like, I was a walking zombie on that set by week 3. I was just like, barely could keep my eyes open. And I'm sure a lot of people were feeling that way. You don't know how far a coffee can go on a day like that. A nice coffee. when you're just feeling like I'm just working my ass off, underappreciated, and nothing matters. And then all of a sudden just takes a moment and says, hey, you matter. And you're like, it gives you enough to keep going. But this is the thing. This is what I'm saying is like, did everybody appreciate that the way that I did? I have no idea. I have no way to tell. But I can tell you that he definitely won my heart in that moment. And this is kind of what I'm saying. I think about, what comes with passion is that you recognize that if you're getting the accolades and the rewards and the leadership position or whatever it is that you wanted and that you're after, always try to remember that there are a lot of people propping you up and helping you to have that. I think that's a really important part of this conversation.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that leadership entered into this conversation, because definitely it's like when passion and great success kind of start to happen together, right? And I was listening to a while back the great sort of intellectual, Noam Chomsky, who he's written a lot of books, been an activist for many years, and I remember him talking about being an anarchist because he still considers himself an anarchist, and there's a lot of connotations around that. And he said, all an anarchist is somebody who challenges unearned power, which totally changed my view, because like I heard that and I just went, am I an anarchist then? And with leadership, a true leader is one who's always trying to earn that position of being a leader. It's not just like, I've gotten here, the rest of you can go fuck yourselves now. Right? It's like, no, that's a continuous thing. And that story of Henry Winkler reminded me of a story that one of our old acting teachers, Nathaniel, told us and stuck with me. He was doing background work on a Sidney Poitier movie back in the day. And at one point, Sidney Poitier, I guess, he came into the extras tent and just addressed everybody. He just said like, hey, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Like you're helping make this movie, like just acknowledge what they're bringing to it. And he just also said to everyone, it's like, look, if you see me and I don't look up at you or, I don't say hi or anything, it's not because, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to, he's like, it's just that I'm here. I have this job to do, and I'm just keeping focused on doing the job that I have to do. Right. And it's a similar thing of just showing it's like of that recognition. Here's one of the great actors, like one of the greats, and especially for his time as well. Sidney Poitier was like, one of the first big Black actors in America, and his, like, what he did was like, he paved the way for so many actors who came after him. And for him to just have that humility and grace and just the recognition of everybody and kind of understanding that he is that thing, but just that he's not above, that he wasn't above anybody, like that's in this thing that he has passion for, right? There comes with it those things too, right? Those certain responsibilities and gratitude that seem to never go or leave. But yeah, man, this took some directions that I wasn't quite expecting this conversation to go. Do you have anything else you want to add, or should we? Well,
I'll add one more thing.
All right.
Okay. We'll wrap this up here. I think the last thing that I would probably say is like, you're gonna have to grow into whatever vision or purpose or passion you have. And I think that the confusion that a lot of people have is like, what am I going to get? And you're often, I think a lot of the time, the reason we're driven towards certain goals or ambitions is because we think we're going to get something that we're missing or lacking or we want or whatever, just feel good. I don't know what it is. And I don't think that's irrelevant. I do think that that matters to a certain degree. But I think there needs to be I think if you're going to do it and you're actually going to follow through, you're going to have to recognize that who you are today is somehow misaligned with what it is you say you want tomorrow. And not to say that you're broken or incomplete or that there's anything wrong with you, because I really don't believe there is, but that you're going to have to build some things that you don't have right now. You're going to have to learn some skills. You're going to have to maybe build some character, some skills, some knowledge, some wisdom. You're going to have to learn how to manage your emotions a little bit better. You're going to have to learn how to have better boundaries, higher standards, and all sorts of things that you don't have right now. And unfortunately, but fortunately, you'll come to realize that those things are going to be built in the valleys more often than they're built on the tops of the mountains. And so if you can look at the low moments of your life as like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is me building the qualities that I need to get where I'm trying to go. And if, say, your vision was like you were looking into a mountain range and you saw a mountain, like several mountains down there, and you're like, well, that mountain would be great. Look at that. That's Snowy Peak. Probably has everybody who's ever climbed a mountain like that just gets praised and rewarded. And I was like, I'd like to climb that mountain. Well, you're going to have to go through a valley and climb a different mountain and go through a valley and climb a different mountain. And you go, well, you know what? I'll just walk through the valley the whole time. That'll be easier. You won't want to do that. You'll want to climb mountains along the way. You'll find that you'll want to achieve certain things along the way of getting to wherever it is you're going. You won't want to just take the low road all the time. You'll want to take the high road, and the high road will mean hiking and traversing and going over a different type of challenging terrain, but you'll also find the light and you'll find glimpses of beauty and all sorts of great things. So I think that as we're talking about this conversation, what comes with passion is that there are highs and lows. And the lows are not bad and the highs are not always good. It's just the journey. And I think you have to learn to kind of embrace a certain quality to, yeah, this is just par for the course. Disappointments happen. Betrayals sometimes occur. Things don't work out the way I planned or hoped. But you go, that's okay. And I think if you can kind of take that approach of like, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm evolving, I'm figuring it out, I'm experiencing some of this stuff for the first time. I thought I knew how it would look when I set out on this journey, and here I am somewhere totally different than I expected, and this is what the adventure is. And so I think that's a really important element of this conversation. We didn't really get into, one other thing, we didn't really get into teammanship much, like how there's a team involved. I think the other thing too to remember, and we talk about this because we talk about, claim your path, find your path, embrace your path, claim your path, way of the artist, right? You're not actually as alone as you think on your journey. There's a lot of travelers you'll actually find you're walking with at times on your journey. And sometimes you'll find travelers will walk with you for quite a ways along your journey. And sometimes you'll be alone. Sometimes you'll find yourself alone and lost and whatever. But know that there are many travelers out there and many people who are pursuing their passions and their dreams, and you will find them and you will have company. And sometimes you'll part ways and that will be sad, but you might find each other again on the journey, and that's beautiful. And it's just all part of the whole thing. So, embrace it. It's what comes with the passion. That's the point. Okay. So Evan, I took a risk on this beer. It's always a risk. If it says sour, to me, it's a risk because it's a ghost sour, I guess. Ghost sour. Okay. Anyway, so this is a salted plum. What does that say? Ambrosi? Umbrosi? Umaboji Gose? I don't know. Salted plum. It's by Moon Underwater brewing. Yeah, anyway, you know what? Like, I've actually found this to be a pretty good sour. The reason why I like it personally is because it's mild. It's not too sour. It's very mildly sour, but it's nice. It's refreshing. It's definitely different because I don't usually have this kind of beer. Yeah, I don't know. Between the salted and the plum, it just kind of has a nice balance for me. So I don't know. It's been interesting. I would drink this again. I like it. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, it's really good. I've really been enjoying this. Yeah, typically like I can, whenever I see sour, my eyebrow kind of goes up a little bit to be like, okay, this could be, but one thing that I have learned is just about my own personal taste is that I'm usually like almost always a Gosa is a winner for me. And in the sort of the sour category, because it's actually salted. And so it helps to kind of balance out the sourness, because otherwise sometimes it can just be like, it's just so puckery and just, some straight sours I find can often just be just way too much for me, beyond a very small amount. But this has been very tasty, refreshing. Yeah, big. I would drink this again for sure. I would definitely have this again. Final thoughts. Yeah, I think that you said a lot of things there just at the end that it's like, yeah, it's, what comes with passion. It's like, yeah, this is what comes with it. Like the highs and the lows, no matter what it is that you're experiencing on that journey, on that path of passion, which doesn't really have an end, right? Like it's just the path of passion, and it'll take you to whatever is next, right? That's all it does. It just takes you to whatever is next. It's never completed. And through that, there are the highs and the lows, and you just got to go, yeah, all right, this is what comes with it, right? These are just the things that come with doing this. It has its good days and it has its bad days, but you can always feel that sense of courage and pride in that you're doing it. The fact that you're doing it, that's where I think, when I was talking about that underlying joy, that's the thing about doing something that you're passionate about, is that there's always that, even on the bad day, you're like, but at least I'm doing it. At least I'm still here. That was a tough day, but fuck it. Like it beats whatever I was doing before. Yeah. So it makes it a little bit easier to go by. But yeah, let's not have any illusions of the fact that sometimes those are going to happen. And if you think it's just going to be, complete smooth sailing on the path of passion, it's like, that's not how it works. And it's also, again, that's not really how you want it either, because, there's got to be growth and evolution that happens on the passion path too. And that only happens through a little bit of adversity. That only happens through being challenged a little bit and coming up against your own shit and being like, okay, the hell is that all about? What's going on here? How come I am allowing these toxic people into my world of passion? How come I'm not treating this thing sacredly enough? How come I'm, ask some of those questions when these things come up, and what those questions do is, full circle, is that they start to tell you about directing your energy. It's like, okay, I got to stop putting my energy into this shit. This stuff doesn't matter. These people don't matter to this thing, right? And these people are not really here to help, right? These people are here in their own self-interest. And I think that it can often sound like in some of this that it's like, well, aren't you just looking out for your own self-interest then too? And it's like, I mean, maybe on some level, but like, I think that if, when you're going into your passion, you're doing it with consideration. It doesn't mean that you won't make some mistakes, maybe hurt some people along the way, but like coming in with good intentions and with what you're doing. And having collaborators in and with that attitude and of respect for what other people bring in, right? Like we were talking about, like, as honor and respect the people who are bringing good things in, right? Because if you fail to have that gratitude and recognition for people who are contributors to your passion, and especially if you're having success, right? If you don't have that recognition, then that's something you need to learn from too. So it goes, that thing goes both ways, right? But yeah, just in terms of where you're directing those energies, figuring those out, like the questions that come up whenever you hit those challenges, they're just informing you of how do you get more down into the meat and marrow of what this thing is really about. Because very often that's something we didn't really talk about, but like, you know, especially early on, like you're going into something that you're passionate about, you continue to learn what that thing even is, you know, all the time. And it's not like that thing's stable either. That thing's morphing and evolving with you as you're evolving. It's evolving. And funny how that works, right? But it's teaching you things along the way in terms of what the whole thing is really actually all about for you, and how to more deeply connect with that thing. And that only happens through those peaks and those valleys and what it has to show you. And it'll only make not only your work richer, but it also will make you, if you allow it, it will make you as a human being that much richer too.
Yeah, you know, we had a conversation a few back, which was like, to be human is to be creative. And I think that, you know, being a human being, like just in this life, pursuing a passion, you're going to find creative ways to get things done. And I don't think something I've been thinking about in this conversation is it's not about art. And I think that, you know, even these podcasts, like, and what we're talking about, you know, Way of the Artist, it's not about being an artist. It's about taking a path of creativity, taking a path of, you know, making yourself less rigid and being, you know, taking an approach of being creative and open and flexible and dynamic. And, you know, I think the thing is that if you knew what was being asked of you when you have a passion, if you knew what it would take to get there, you probably wouldn't do it. And this goes for pretty much all passions. Anything that comes into your life that you get passionate about, if you really knew what it would take to get to wherever it is you think you're going to ultimately go, if you knew that, you would probably run away, because and this is the thing that I think has been the biggest epiphany and awareness for myself, is that my small self, which is where I'm at right now, because I'm always, like, we talk about this, oh, my higher self and my small self and whatever, and all that stuff, like people talk about this, these terms get thrown around. But in reality, whenever you start a journey, you're always at your small self. You're not at your higher self. You might be motivated and driven to be your higher self, but you're really not there. You haven't built the character, the discipline. You haven't built the muscle. Like riding a motorcycle, I've ridden a motorcycle for just about a year now. And I've learned to just corner and lean and do a whole bunch of stuff. My hands have gotten so strong. They've gotten so strong from being able to just grip the handlebars every day. And when I started, my hands are never like this. My hands have muscles in them. Like I can feel it. They're thicker. They're just strong. I can, you know, and I have a sense of touch in my hand that I never had before. When I started my journey, I didn't have that. And you don't even know what you don't have when you start your passion journey. So what comes with it is that you're going to build things you don't even know you're going to build. You're going to build things that you don't even know come with this journey. And so that's going to be a part of it. And so I think what we're kind of venturing into with this conversation is that just constantly be willing to like humble yourself and be like, hey, this is what I need to do. This is where I need to grow. Obviously, and I think we've pointed out a few things. Recognize that your boundaries are probably not strong enough, and strong enough, and sometimes well thought out enough, because maybe they're too strong and you're actually blocking out things that you need. Maybe you're being too safe and too conservative and too protective of everything that you're not even open to anything. So maybe your boundaries need to be taken down a notch, but for someone else, they need to have stronger boundaries. They need to actually hold more people or more things out to protect their energy and nurture their energy. And then standards. Maybe your standards are too high and you're not being open to work with people, and you're not giving yourself opportunities because you're just so rigid and you're closing everything off. And for other people, your standards are too low. You're accepting too low quality of people to come into your life and be in your inner circle or whatever that might be. And so, but it's all very personal, and you have to kind of navigate this and determine this. And I think it's great to have a mentor and a coach, and sometimes we're going to need those things. But I think sometimes you just have to have a heart to heart with yourself and just be honest with yourself and be like, what do I need for me? And I do this with myself all the time, man. Like, I went through a big disappointment this last week or two, and it was big. It was a real big one. I was like, a vision that I've been working towards for a while is kind of like things just a major setback, things fell through. And I was like, okay, I walked away from that, and I've had heart to hearts with myself. And I go, okay, well, what am I learning from this? Where are my standards? Where are my boundaries? Where, how am I doing my life? And I realized there was a lot of work to do. And the disappointment was a gift. It wasn't a bad thing. Doesn't mean I didn't feel sad. Doesn't mean I didn't feel angry and frustrated and all sorts of other emotions. But that's the valley. And the valley is teaching me something very important. And this is what comes with passion. I think that's ultimately, I just keep saying that, I think this is a very, very interesting conversation. So I would say, I don't know if I could send anybody off and send myself off with some, way to use this. I would say whenever you experience anything, whether it be good or bad, I would just reiterate to yourself, this is what comes with passion. And then try to see how that's true.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.